Peace. Peace and elevation, family. It's your brother Mike X. Welcome to my YouTube channel, Brother Mike X Speaks. I pray that you will share this video, subscribe to this video. I pray that you will open your mind to seeking the truth, And truth is a process. It's a process of study, Studying the history of whatever it is that you want to gain an understanding of, The present rests upon the past. If you want to understand the present, you have to gain a greater understanding of the past, And if you want to gain more power and influence over your future or the future, you need to begin to take positive possession of your life, your habits, your actions, your customs as an individual, particularly in the present, Your past has created the type of environment, the conditions and the conditioning that you're living and existing in the present, The habits, the customs that you had in the past is what created your present. And if you don't like your present, then you need to begin to do things differently, You need to educate yourself so that you can make better decisions, most likely different decisions, so that you can begin to take steps that will ensure that your future will be better, than what it presently is now, And start with yourself, If you try to influence things outside of yourself before you take a greater stock and practice of self-mastery, of self-control, you won't be successful, Everything rests upon the type of life that you're living now. And that's what we do a lot of times. We want things outside of ourselves to change before we change, That's not the way this thing works, If you stay the same, then your conditioning and your condition that you're living within will most likely stay the same. But if you decide that you want to begin to practice a greater discipline in your health and well-being, in your consciousness, in your awareness, in your perspective on how you view life, you know what I mean? And the way you manage your reaction to things, your emotions, the way you manage your emotions. They say that life is 10% of what happens to you and 90% of how you respond, A lot of us don't control our emotions. We put almost no practice in controlling our emotions. So we have a whole lot of triggers that we're not being responsible for. And a lot of times when other people know what triggers you, they find great joy in pushing your buttons and making you act out of character. You know what I mean? But if you begin to practice a greater self-control over, again, your habits, your actions, the confidence that you begin to build in yourself, once you realize that you have more power over your own life than you may have previously practiced. You know what I mean? You begin to decide what kind of life you want to live. You begin to study and do research on what are the steps that will help you to be successful at the goals that you begin to choose for yourself. You begin to figure out what kind of steps you need to take on a daily basis towards gaining and maintaining and manifesting greater physical health and well-being. You begin to study, and decide where you want to become more consciously empowered in the different subject areas that you want to exert greater control within. You stop watching so much TV and mindless scrolling on social media. You begin to realize, man, that time is of the essence, and you can either invest it in worthwhile actions and practices, or you can waste it, And time flies when you don't have a particular goal or purpose. You know what I mean? But when you begin to practice mindfulness in the way that you use your time, particularly your weekends, you know what I mean? Particularly your mornings, particularly your evenings, because a lot of us, keeping it 100%, 1,000% real, a lot of us are, we work, in a society, a capitalist society, a society where you gotta punch a clock a lot of times for 8 hours or more. A lot of times you're obligated to whatever your job is and whatever duties you have to fulfill during that time to get the paycheck that a lot of us find ourselves working for. It's hard to put your dreams first. It's hard during those times to practice the type of conscientious or conscious living practices that will bring you towards achieving your dreams and living your best life. So a lot of times, if you want to pursue your dreams and pursue being able to one day manifest your best life, a lot of times, or most of the time, you're going to have to begin to practice after your 8 hours or more working a particular job, a traditional job for some entity that you may be connected to. You're going to have to practice using your evenings better, not going home and, plopping yourself down on the couch or in your bed or whatever the case may be, and again, mindlessly watching TV, until you fall asleep, or scrolling through social media, with no particular design or process that will help you to educate yourself, so that you can begin to make better moves, choose to make better moves. You're going to have to use your evenings in some productive way, that will help you to practice the habits that give birth to a health and well-being physically, that give birth to a greater consciousness as you pursue knowledge and you begin to gain greater wisdom on how to live this life. And through your practice in a more wise usage of your time, you begin to gain a strong understanding of what this life is really about. And you begin to recognize patterns that others have used to become successful. That if you begin to use those patterns in your life, you can rest assured that you will begin to become successful in your own personal endeavors. You know what I mean? So this is one of the things that we have to begin to practice in our lives, utilizing our evenings better, utilizing our mornings better, going to sleep at a healthy time. A lot of times there's no reason for you to be a night owl, staying up to 11, 12, 1 o'clock at night. You know what I mean? Get your rest. Get you a decent amount of rest. Going to sleep at 9:30, 10 tops, so that you can get up early in the morning, way before you have to be to work. At whatever job that you may be contracted or obligated to. A lot of times, man, we stay up so late, and then in the morning time, we really don't like a lot of times the jobs that we work anyway. Most of the time. Unless you are blessed to do something that you like doing. Like for my whole adult life, I've worked with youth. For the past 30 plus years, I've worked with young people in one way or another, and I chose to work in this field because I wanted to be able to pass on, my positive example as an adult, as an older brother, as a father figure, so to speak. I wanted to be able to pass on knowledge, wisdom, understanding, truth, counseling, mentoring, to the young people coming up behind me. I wanted to be able to pass on things that weren't passed on to me. You know, I wanted to be a responsible adult, to be able to help the babies, you know, so to speak. So, you know, I've been blessed to do something that I chose to do, that I wanted to do. Now, I'm not going to act like it's all been fun and games, man, because it hasn't been. Because our youth have been set up to fail. You know, black youth have been set up to fail. Black youth have been set up to be pawns, you know, to be thugs, to be criminals, to be aimless, so that they can be taken advantage of by a society that gains power through our disempowerment. Black youth have been set up to be self-hating. Black youth have been set up to be ignorant and savage, you know, thugs and criminals. This society is not scared of black youth being thugs, being criminals, being savage, being ignorant. They're not afraid of that. This is the most incarcerative country on the planet Earth. This country has more prisons and jails and foster care and group homes and juvenile justice, you know, systems than any place on this earth. So they're not afraid of our youth being criminal. They say that crime doesn't pay, but it pays if you're the one who owns the prison. And there's a lot of places, man, corporations that own prisons, you know, private prisons. Anyway, that's not really what I don't really want to focus on unpacking all of that. But I do want to say that our youth have been let down, you know, and we need to find a way to live more empowered lives as adults, as individuals, so that we can begin to, each one of us, live our most positive lives, so that we can begin to overflow the fruits of our existence into the lives of the youth that are looking to us. Some of you might think that our youth are too far gone. You know, that our youth have become so self-hating, so angry, so sinister, that you are afraid to engage our youth. But having worked with youth for the last 30 plus years, I know that if you learn how to love yourself stronger than they hate themselves, and you can begin to exhibit a love in your contact with and your connection with our youth, they will positively respond over time. You know what I mean? So I'm not going to go too long, but the way I'll end this off is saying we owe this to ourselves as a people. We are more empowered, or more potentially empowered, to take positive ownership over our own lives than to just live in fear and to live as pawns to the corporate machine. You know, we're afraid that if we can't maintain access to being able to buy our food and rent our homes and depend upon 911, you know, the police, or the incarceration of those who fell through the cracks, and to live in places where we need to put 5 or 6 locks on our door to keep the dangerous people out. This is how we're being controlled. Through fear. And not having any ownership over the businesses in our community, to where we can have greater control over the products and services that we need. So other groups provide you your food, or what masquerades as food. You know what I mean? Other folks make your clothes. Other folks own the buildings that you live in. And thus they have more control over our community than we have. Other folks own and run the schools, and they decide what kind of curriculums are taught. And they don't teach us how to love ourselves. They don't teach us how to love each other. They don't teach us to own, that God bless the child who has his own, to seek to become owners. So a lot of times we don't have any real vested interest in the communities that we exist within. And as our children, our cute, cuddly babies, grow up in these type of communities, and they begin to fall through the cracks and become more savage and thug and criminal, and they begin to hate themselves and hate each other, we sacrifice them. We don't fight hard enough for them. And it's become normalized. As they become more hateful, it becomes easier to look down on them. But like the old African proverb says, the child who was raised without love will eventually burn down the village to feel its warmth. A lot of those precious young lives that never knew love and now are so hateful and bitter in their teen years and their young adult lives, we played a role in allowing them to become that way. And yeah, there were forces that took the fathers out the home, that took the male presence out of the community so that they wouldn't know how to live as adults, as men, and to seek to become protectors and providers for the community, for our women, for our wives, our mothers, for our children. We have to do better, family. We definitely have to do better. So this video, this quick video, it's starting to become not as quick. I wasn't necessarily planning to talk this long, but I thank you for listening to me. I hope that you're able to get something out of this video. I hope that we will begin to stand up in our own lives so that we can provide necessary examples and leadership to the young people coming up behind us, so that we can begin to give them love as we learn how to love ourselves again. You know what I mean? So that we can take greater responsibility over our communities and the way they are run. The blame is not ours. The ghetto is a created place. You know what I mean? Once upon a time, we had greater control over the way we lived. In the 1800s, in the early 1900s, we had and began to build places like Rosewood, places like Black Wall Street, Tulsa, Oklahoma. There was over 100 independent, sovereign, autonomous, prosperous black communities that existed in the United States. We have shown and proved before that if left to our own devices, that we could organize ourselves around the concept of black love. But these places, to a community, to each community, a lot of times the white communities, I'll say at those times, they found it to not be in their interest to allow black, independent, autonomous, sovereign communities to exist. They saw it as a threat to their hegemony, to them being top dog or at the pinnacle. of being, in control of the political, social, economic mainstream of what it means to be white in America. And reasons were found for them to ultimately take over and destroy those examples of black independence, of black sovereignty. They wanted us to be at the bottom. Like the old saying, if you're white, you're all right. If you're brown, stick around. If you're yellow, you're mellow. But if you're black, get the hell back. Black people in America were meant to be last, socially, politically, economically. And we are last. And everybody banks upon, again, being able to be prosperous as they sell us food, as they sell us clothes, as they sell us or rent us places to live. And I don't necessarily believe that makes everyone racist or bad people. But when it comes to being economically prosperous, a lot of them are invested in things remaining as they are. When it comes to being politically empowered, a lot of not just white people, but other ethnicities are invested in things remaining as they are in order for them to be politically empowered, in order for them to be economically empowered. They're invested in things remaining the way they are. So this is why a lot of times racism and political economic injustices continue to remain alive through generations. As generations die off, or they get older and then they die off, new generations are taught to rise up and to take their place, to perpetuate the economic injustice, the political injustices, the social divisions and hatred and bigotries and prejudices. In order for these things to end, we need to take greater responsibility over our lives. And in order for these things to end, racial bigotry and prejudice, other racial entities need to begin to pursue a greater humanity. You don't have to follow the patterns that your ancestors laid down. A lot of white people will say things such as, I never enslaved anyone. Yeah, but you enjoy the political economic fruits that were born from that enslavement process, from the economic and political injustices that created the wealth gap, that created the political disenfranchisement that created political practices that created the black ghettos, that stopped us from being able to own and run our own communities and to own our own homes and to create businesses the way you take it for granted. If you're interested in making America a greater place for us all to live within, you have to begin to put an end to the karma. The bad karma that was created by creating a nation where racial animosity and bigotry and prejudice and violence and injustice could be practiced. There's a lot of bad karma here in America, generationally, that goes back even before the official creation of America. A lot of blood, a lot of injustice, a lot of hatred, a lot of bigotry and prejudice has created the present day darkness that we're all living within. Like it says in the scriptures, a house divided against itself cannot stand. And this house has been and is divided against itself. And if this house is to somehow be redeemed or to be cleansed of that bad karma, then we need enlightened, spiritual, human, focused people to live enlightened lives and not to practice the same racial animosity and bigotry and prejudice that they may have inherited. We need open-minded individuals who will choose to live and practice a greater compassion and empathy in the possible responsibility that needs to be exercised in creating a rich diversity that we all can prosper from. And if we don't choose to live and to practice a greater empathy and compassion and acknowledgement of the dark history that created these dark times, and choose to practice a greater spiritual enlightenment and cooperation and collaboration across racial lines, across so-called political lines, it's not going to be good. There's no way that you can practice prosperity for long while demoting your brother to poverty. You know what I mean? Like I said in the last video, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. The injustices that you allow to exist while you try to practice your so-called heaven on earth, it won't last. It can't. You know, karma says that you have to give what you want to enjoy. If you want love and peace and prosperity, then you have to be willing to give it to your neighbor, or else you're not going to be able to maintain it. So having said that, this video was way longer than I wanted it to be. I say peace and elevation. For anyone who's still with me, please share and subscribe to my YouTube channel, and I'll see you soon. Peace and elevation.